Turning to the rising levels in oceans. Now, this is a topic that I'm going to be honest, I do not know a ton about. I read your chapter on it and found it very interesting, but I want to hear your explanation of the problem because you talk in the beginning about the problem of climate change and global warming and fossil fuels. And as I understood it, essentially your conclusion is we don't have the tools currently to stop that warming process. So the goal should be to mitigate the effects of it and stop them from being cataclysmic. Is that correct?
Very, very well put. Yes, absolutely. So, we have a situation that's just horrifying, and I think this is a global problem, and probably the biggest problem for literally for all humanity. Last year, 2024, was the hottest year on Earth in recorded history. We're actually headed for a socioeconomic catastrophe, unlike anything that's ever faced human beings. Uh, the global warming, as you said, is causing the polar ice caps to melt at a rate that would fill 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools every second. It's an incredible amount of water. And by the end of this century, all coastal cities and islands are going to be flooded. Athens, nobody's doing anything about this. It's an incredible problem. And as I looked into this and studied this, I discovered we can stop the ocean levels from rising. And at the same time, we can use all that fresh water for the billions of people who live in the most parched areas of our planet. So here we actually have a solution that has two-pronged benefits of saving the planet and stopping hunger and thirst. And the way we do it, if you're interested, I'll go into how that happens.
Please, please, I love that. But I just want to just quickly circle back before we talk about how we solve the solution,
Mm-hmm.
because for those who don't understand, why is rising ocean levels so problematic to the global socioeconomic condition? Like, what I think I understand it a little bit, but for those listening who don't know, why is that such a large problem?
Well, take it on a per coastal city. Picture Manhattan, all the streets being underwater. Picture the cities that are already low in elevation, like New Orleans, uh, completely underwater. But
Is that a real possi- Sorry, is that a real
it really
possibility?
is that just the ocean level rise through the end of this century. It's projected that 12 million Americans are going to be displaced, that their homes are going to be uninhabitable along all coasts. And now you have this globally. So imagine not just the inconvenience that people are going to have to move and leave their homes. Think of the economic factor here. If you have whole cities that have to be abandoned, buildings, homes, everything in a city is worthless because guess what? It's underwater. So this is not a simple thing. This is a serious thing that nobody is stopping. And there's real consensus that it's happening. There's evidence of this happening. And you can call it climate change, you can call it global warming, you can call it a natural function of the planet of heating and cooling, which happens. It's happening much faster than historically, that it's heating up. You can say it is or isn't part of fossil fuels being burned, but the fact is it's happening, and either we let it happen or solve it. And I've done a lot of research on this. Nobody's putting forth ways to stop this, and here's a way to stop it.
So you just set yourself up. What is the way to stop it?
So, as I said, we're talking about a huge amount of water that would fill 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools every second. And I started getting into this, and I found that that's only a small fraction of the water going into the oceans from just our 20 largest rivers. Really? I was shocked by this. There's so much water pouring into the oceans from our rivers. So the rivers, have rainwater, snow melt. They distribute to, for agriculture, for human consumption, all the way down their path, and whatever's left over goes into the ocean. But it's a massive amount of water, and of course, there are ecosystems that need that water, that goes into the ocean. So that water is still needed. But incredibly, if we channel just 7% of the water in those 20 largest rivers to arid lands, that will actually stop the ocean levels from rising. And again, we move that water to arid lands, and we provide fresh water for agriculture and for human consumption. Change the world. By the way, this is not pie in the sky. There's actually a model for this. For decades already, there's been a project called the Central Arizona Project that has moved water 336 miles from the Colorado River to deliver fresh water to 5 million people living in Phoenix and Tucson. And it's been a huge success. And again, they've been doing this for decades. And if you look at the cost of that project, it's a home run. It is so profitable compared to the water and resources and building communities that it has done. It's just something that we've got to do on a global basis. And even though this is going to cost a tremendous amount of money, the money that it's going to save from, as I said, the destruction of the coastal cities and islands is a drop in the maybe a drop in the bucket is not the right term, but it's got to be done. This is a fabulous solution that we already know works.
So what does this exactly entail when you're saying discharging fresh water that's flowing from the oceans into the rivers? Are we creating a dam to stop some of the flow? Like, how are we stopping the water from going, all of the water from going into the river?
You have different places along a major river that water is channeled out of the main river flow and can go to a reservoir. Let's just say it's just a new channel fills up a reservoir, and then that reservoir is released through piping, through canals, open water areas, and then even using existing waterways. So there's a whole series of possibilities for how you move that water. But if you move it to like reservoirs and then have a dam at the end of the reservoir, you're creating, the hydroelectric power that is going to power all the energy of the pumps and the movement that you have with the canals and everything to move that water. So again, it's just 7%. You're not going to dam up a whole river. You have a channel opening that moves some of the water.
So besides the cost you're saying of, like, if we don't do this, we're going to have the coastal cities that are going to be destroyed and a lot of people displaced. That's one argument. I think that'll sell a lot of people. But for the people that still are skeptical of the possibility that all the coastal cities could be flooded, what other benefits does building these? They're like pipelines, or they're offshoots to discharge the water. Remember, like, what can they bring? Can these bring jobs? Can these bring agriculture? Can these bring fresh cleaning water? What other benefits can these bring?
All of those for sure. This is a huge project, probably the biggest project ever undertaken in the history of human beings. So you're talking about employing thousands of people, maybe millions of people, and think of this: it's probably worthwhile, even if it didn't stop the ocean levels from rising. The benefits for humans you know, is astounding. 25% of human beings on our planet don't have fresh water close by them. 50% of the people on our planet do not have sanitary conditions. It's a shocking number. And if you could solve those problems for the benefit of humanity, oh my God, what an incredible thing. And then you also save a big chunk of our planet at the same time. This is something that's got to happen. And there are big projects that have been undertaken throughout human history. One of the things I point to in the book is the Panama Canal. The U.S. paid for and did the labor for a 51-mile canal through the country of Panama. And prior to that, any ships that went from the Atlantic to the Pacific had to go all the way around South America. And it doubled, like from Europe to the United States, for example, it doubled the distance of the voyage, and of course doubled the cost. So they found that here's an area that if you canal through 51 miles, you cut off, I think it's 6,000 miles of additional voyage. So it's an economic massive benefit. So this has been in existence for 111 years. And if you look at the cost of what it of the cost, I think was $80 million. I might be wrong on that. I think $80 million in 1910. Well, the benefits, far outweigh that probably every quarter. So these are things that are, century long benefits for this planet and our people. And it's, big thinking that I think we got to start doing.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be enough to happen just via the U.S. rivers, right? We need
Right.
coordination globally. I think you talk about if we did it with the 7 largest rivers,
20 largest.
20 largest rivers, but 7% stop 7%.
That's right.
That's right?
Yeah.
So it would take a lot of global coordination, as I understand it. We need to get world leaders from all different countries to come together, create a conference or some kind of action plan that people actually stick to, because we have the Paris Agreement, and countries have always set these targets that they're going to meet. They never meet them. They never oblige by them. So it seems to me you'd have to create some mechanism where there's a real incentive for countries to do this, and maybe it's the incentive that you just provided, but you also need some kind of way to ensure that countries say they're going to do it and then back out, right?
No, I think you're very right. And it's kind of a case of self-preservation. So all countries that have coastlines have a vested interest in this happening. All countries that have arid lands and poor people without water resources have a vested interest in this happening. So, maybe we're not going to get every country to participate who, are landlocked and have all the water they need. Should they? Yes, I think they should participate. But I think there's enough vested interest by countries that are really in danger that this could get done.
The second solution you provide, which I had never really thought about or heard of, was you kind of talk about this idea that we don't have a water problem, we have a salt problem. We have a ton of salt.
Yeah, actually, Joe Rogan said that.
Joe Rogan said that?
Yeah,
That's
it
funny.
wasn't mine. He said, in this world, we don't have a water problem. We have a salt problem. We have so much water that the planet is covered with this stuff, but most of it is completely unusable unless you're a fish.
Right. But I had never heard of these efforts to desalinate
Right.
the water. Is that actually a feasible
thing
that could be accomplished?
I think there are 20,000 desalination projects in the world right now. So yes, Absolutely. You can take salt out of ocean water so that you make clean water for use in a community for that's typically fairly close to a coast. So yes, it's a massive thought, to think that it's the only thing you have to do. It could be in coordination, with channeling water from the rivers. You could also have desalination plants uh, up and down, virtually every coast, and provide fresh water for the people along those coasts, which are very often arid.
And I mean, what is the cost? That seems like a very costly project, is it
You're
not?
right. It is. It's very costly. It takes a lot of energy. It takes land. Uh, it's a costly project to squeeze the salt out of water, but it's been done viably, literally all over the world. I think there are 9 desalination plants just in California right now operating. So you can operate these profitably, and it makes sense. So to have enough of them that are going to keep the ocean levels at where we need them, massive, massive problem. But it certainly can be hand in hand with rechanneling some river water.
So, I mean, do you think that primarily the solution is rechanneling the river water, and then it's a secondary solution?
Yeah,
It's the desalinization.
yeah, I do. I think that you could solve the whole problem with channeling river water. Now, look, I said channel 7% from the 20 largest rivers. But think if we have 100 rivers, whose water ends up in the oceans, maybe you have to take out 4% from each river. So if just the 20, you can solve this problem.
I really appreciate this solution because I never heard about it talked about this way. It's really interesting. It also reminded me because we were going to have this discussion about 2 weeks ago, and you were in L.A., the L.A. area, and there was obviously something going on there, which most people know about, these fires. So I just wanted to ask, is your house okay? Is your family all okay? Like, what's going on with
Well,
that?
thanks for asking. Yeah, I did have to cancel and reschedule with you 2 weeks ago. When we had the horrible fires, uh, we lost our power. Thankfully, our house exists. We're here. Everything is fine. But we lost all electricity for 5 days, and believe me, we are counting our blessings compared to so many people who live where we live, who just lost everything. It's just so tragic. It's awful. We had a little bit of a struggle. My wife had COVID during the time the power was out. It took me 2 days to be able to buy a generator just to put some heat in our bedroom. So I think that it prolonged her illness. And then I got COVID, but I was pretty lucky about it. But yeah, it's been very, very horrible here. It's higher winds than I'd ever seen, and I've lived here 50 years. And then the Pacific Palisades were not prepared. The government left that area vulnerable, and look, it was an insane situation of, as I said, winds unlike anything we've ever seen, 100 miles an hour, and it's dry here. It's dry as a bone. We haven't had rain in I think 7, 8 months, so it's dry. That just wind, can cause things to just explode in fire. But we're living in a community where the amount of uh, uh, employees for fighting fire, firemen, was reduced. Police have been reduced. Equipment for firefighting has been reduced. You probably saw pictures of this where there was a reservoir up in the hills above Pacific Palisades that was bone dry. They were doing repairs. And this was like the main way for the water to come in to fight a fire. Firefighters were getting to a fire, plugging in their hose in a hydrant, and no water came out. What a damn disaster! So it's a horrifying situation, on both counts of, the natural occurrence of this is horrible and almost unavoidable. But can we do better? Yes, we can.
So it was partly failed governance that made the problem worse, in your opinion.
Made it worse, for sure.
And it sounds like maybe to deal with the drought problem, some of this ocean water, divergence, but also the river channeling the water that would go into the ocean and bringing it to canals and distributing it through dry states and parts of the country would be beneficial.
Very possibly, sure.